All right, everybody. So now that today we spent some time going over what you know about Kentucky and talked a little about some of the views that people may have of the state for one reason or another, today we're going to talk about Kentucky's geography. And the geography of Kentucky is very interesting. It's a way that our state sometimes is deemed a southern state, but in many ways, Kentucky can be seen as a southern state or a northern state or an eastern state or a western state or maybe all of the above. And based on where you live in Kentucky, I think is where you come to that answer. But as we go through the geography stuff about Kentucky in the next couple of weeks, be thinking to yourself, is Kentucky a southern state or is Kentucky a northern state? And that's kind of a subject that we'll dive into near the end of this unit, but already now start to think about it. What this presentation will cover is just some very basic information about Kentucky geography, as well as the five major regions of Kentucky, regions that you're going to do some independent research on for class on Thursday. And you do want to put a one down for your notes because that will help you keep everything together and organized, and hopefully will make things better just in general as you go through some stuff this year. So, in general, today we're going to talk about some basics of Kentucky's geography. Hopefully, you'll find this interesting, and it might also, get you some. You might relate to some of this information, obviously, because you're here in Kentucky. All right, so let's first talk about the land of Kentucky. If you wanted to really total up Kentucky's land in terms of square mileage, it'd be about 40,395 square miles. And that would place us 37th among the 50 states. If the District of Columbia is ever added as a state, we'd be 37th out of 51. But the thing is that in terms of where we rank as a size differential of various states, we come near the bottom tier. And one thing you have to remember is Kentucky, we used to be part of Virginia until finally in the 1790s we separated, became our own state. But for a long time, Kentucky's territory was deemed as an extension of Virginia. So look at a U.S. map of Virginia and just imagine Kentucky encompassing that. And that would be one really big state. Also, Kentucky here, we have more navigable streams and rivers than any other state, with the exception of Alaska. And Alaska is really just kind of like the last American frontier. There's still a lot of people there living without electricity, and they live just like settlers did on the log cabins and things like that in the colonial period. But here in Kentucky, we are blessed with having a lot of great waterways, and these have become tourist attractions as well as places of commerce. I mean, think about it. To the west, we have the Mississippi River. To the north, we have the Ohio River. We have other rivers that converge here into the middle of the state. So we are a state that has a lot of easy ways to get around, and the early settlers took advantage of that when they were trying to settle various pieces of Kentucky. And we're going to get into some of the early settlers and the peoples and their experiences here in a couple of weeks. Also, rivers do a lot to distinguish Kentucky's borders. I mean, you can trace the top of Kentucky, for example, based on the path of the Ohio River. And you can basically almost trace our southern half for some of the same reasons of these navigable places. So when you look at why Kentucky is the shape that it is, you have to owe a lot of that to geography. The Appalachian Mountains kind of cut across our east, the Ohio River is to our north, we have the Mississippi to the west, and these kind of box in Kentucky and its borders to what they are today. The only issue, though, with having so many rivers is it does open us to a lot of flooding. And Kentucky has had some devastating floods. And if we have time in this class, we will be covering some of those floods and their impact. I mean, especially if you look at the western part of the state, which we'll talk about, the western side of the state tends to be the most low-lying land in Kentucky. And because it has such low land, the floods can come in. There was a 1937 flood of the Ohio River. 60% of Louisville's homes were underwater in that flood. And the state of Kentucky required a lot of assistance from the federal government when it came to rebuilding and trying to help people get their feet back under them to go forward. And also, that flood smashed about 33% of Covington. And Covington is a city that's very short from Cincinnati. It's about 3 miles south of Cincinnati. So the thing is that These rivers have been a blessing to Kentucky, but they've also been a curse. And we also had a major flood in Cynthiana back in the late 1990s. And so there have been a lot of floods in Kentucky that have done a lot of damage, but we owe a lot of who we are to the land. When it comes to climate, Kentucky, we have all four seasons. And the joke is sometimes we have all four seasons in one week, right? You all know how that is possibly in the spring that, we'll have some days that get near 75, 80 degrees. We'll have some spring days that are in the 60s. We'll have some days in the spring that get down to, 30s or 40s in the morning. And that kind of creates a lot of allergy issues for people that live in this state. But the one interesting thing about our climate is we do have distinct seasons. We are not Florida. We are not Texas. We're not San Diego, California, where the temperature stays in the 60s all year round. We do have distinct seasons in this state. Northern Kentucky, though, does tend to be colder than the rest of the state. And by Northern Kentucky, we're talking about counties really from Grant County north. And in the northern part of the state, it's about 5 degrees cooler at all times. So here in Lincoln County today, the day I'm recording these notes, it's about 92 degrees outside. But in northern Kentucky, the temperature is probably about 87. And that's just an average, of course, but that's what things look like. Our average temperatures as a whole in this state can fluctuate anywhere from 23 degrees to 87. But again, remember that's an average. We have many days in this state where the thermometer goes above 87. We have a lot of days in the winter, especially remember a couple years ago when we had that polar blast and we were seeing great negative temperatures. I think school may have been let out for a while with some of the negative wind chills that occur. So keep in mind, Kentucky, we have some wild fluctuations in temperature and it can be kind of wild. But for our agriculture, these distinct seasons are an advantage. For a lot of the early settlers of Kentucky, they really liked the climate. And they commented on how much they liked the climate in this area because it allowed for a 7 to 8 month growing season, which was ideal for a poor man's crop like tobacco. Tobacco was called a poor man's crop because you didn't really need a lot of slaves in which to harvest it and somebody could try to make it alone. Whereas sugar would require a lot of slaves, required a lot of a heated climate to work. But tobacco became a big centerpiece economically here in Kentucky, largely because the growing seasons were allowed for that due to the climate. So here in Kentucky, remember we have 120 counties, and we talked today about why we have 120 counties, and is that a major problem, and what should be done about it? But here in Kentucky, when you look at the regions of the state, a lot of geographers will split the state into 5 to 6 different regions. Now, this region called the knobs, you'll notice that Lincoln County right here, we're part of that region. For the purposes of our research exercise, though, that's going to become part of the bluegrass region because a lot of geographers today don't talk much about the knobs and they just lump it in with the other bluegrass region. So we're going to talk in the next slide about what makes these regions unique, and then you're going to research a county in each of these various regions. So the different regions of the state, as you saw in the last diagram, we have the Jackson Purchase, which is in the far western side of the state, the Pennyroyal or the Pennyroyal region, whichever one you want to use is correct, the Western Coalfields, the Bluegrass, depending on which geographer you are, the Knobs, and the Eastern Coalfields. Sometimes these are also referred to as the mountains of Kentucky. And of course, that is in reference to the Appalachian Mountains that are there. Some of these regions have some defining characteristics. We'll note some of these characteristics in your research. But first, we have the Jackson Purchase, and the Jackson Purchase is the lowest geographic level of Kentucky. Okay, so it's the lowest land level of anything in the state. So that's number one with the Jackson Purchase. And it's called the Jackson Purchase, by the way, after U.S. President Andrew Jackson, who played a role in helping to secure the purchase of that land for Kentucky from the nearby Native American tribes. That region was brought into the state actually in 1818, so it's the newest part of the state. The Pennyroyal region has the largest underground cave system in the world, and you may already know what it is. And you may put that as part of your research on this region if you find the county that one of those caves is a part of. But Pennyroyal is known globally for its vast network of caves, many of which, by the way, have yet to be mapped. The Western coal fields are called that because of the coal that is found in that region, but this is also a good farming region of the state. A lot of good fertile farmland can be found there, we call it the Western coal fields because not only do we have a lot of coal in the eastern side of the state, we also have it in that western portion. The Bluegrass area, which Lincoln County we're putting as part of it, as well as Lexington and northern Kentucky, is known for its bluegrass. Now, bluegrass is actually not a strain of grass that is unique to Kentucky, and it's not native to Kentucky. In fact, it was brought here by the early English settlers. They brought the seeds and stuff on them, and then they spread. And the bluegrass is a rich grass that can be grazed by horses. And that makes for rich farmland, but also, as I said, good grazing. And that's why the horse capital of Kentucky is centered in that bluegrass region. But remember, again, bluegrass is not native to Kentucky. Just kind of understand that. And then finally, the eastern coal fields. This is the Appalachian Mountain chain. And in fact, if you look at some of the demographics of the state today, a lot of poverty can be found in this Appalachian region. We're going to explore some of the reasons behind that later. But the Appalachian region, you could say, maybe culturally speaking, is the most distinctive of the rest of Kentucky. It has its own musical styles, its own cultural norms, and we're going to talk about how it is later that each of these regions being settled by different people has produced different cultural outcomes and has kind of made Kentucky a very rich place in which to do business. So now that we've gone over these regions, this is what you want to do before the next class. So you want to, first of all, complete this region research exercise on Kentucky. You'll find a Google document in our Google Classroom that will have this. But what you're doing is you're picking one county from each of Kentucky's regions. So you're picking one from the Jackson Purchase, one from the Pennyroyal, one from the Western Coalfields, one from the Bluegrass, one from the Eastern Coalfields. And then what I want you to do is just jot down some characteristics. Just do a simple Google search of this county and find out some basic information about it. Now, what I don't want is how many people live there or anything like that. What I want is what makes that region unique. Like think about landmarks that happen to be there, maybe state parks that happen to be there, any famous people from there, just any famous restaurants. Like what are some major things that that county is known for? By the way, when you do the Bluegrass region, I'm not letting you do Lincoln County. We're going to do some stuff with Lincoln County history in this class, but not yet, all right? And then there are a few small reflection questions at the end. You want to be prepared on Thursday to share out your findings in the class. So we'll do a collaborative document possibly, or I'll call on some people to share out. And we'll just kind of assemble, what do we have and kind of what do we think makes each of these different regions unique versus, say, us. Because you live in the Bluegrass region, so you're already kind of familiar with this. You may have gone to Lexington in the past and know what's going on there. But what about these other regions of the state? And maybe you have relatives in those sides of the state. And if you do, use their county for this assignment, okay? Make it easy on yourself. But just try to get a good understanding as you do this region research of what's unique about these different places. And do Kentuckians share a lot more in common, or do we have a lot more that's different about us? So if you need help as you do this, feel free to email me. I'll be here to help you in any way I can. But otherwise, I will see you in class on Thursday.